My app has been acting up. It's cutting me off here and there. So this is about that gentleman, Grandmaster Jay, I believe his name was. This is a Kentucky militia leader going to prison for flagging cops with rifle. Although he was convicted for pointing his rifle at federal task force officers during a September 4th, 2020 demonstration. Now, if a white man pointed their gun at law enforcement officers, I don't think he'd be going to prison. I think he'd be getting put in the ground. Okay, for example, imagine that this was a Ku Klux Klan demonstration and one of the Klansmen had a firearm and pointed it at law enforcement officers. Do you think they'd be arresting him, or do you think they'd be filling him full of holes? Now, this is a photo of this gentleman, John F. Johnson, aiming his firearm at a police helicopter. Now, this is a gentleman that has military experience. So he knows how to give suppressive fire and how to take down aircraft and things like that. This is what people are not understanding. These are the people that are being riled up by the fallacious accusations by places like Bucks County, by organizations like CSP and the people that work at Lenape Valley Foundation, Pendle Mental Health, etc., that are promoting this fallacious idea that blacks are being, and by Donald Trump, okay? People remember I pointed out Donald Trump's nonsense with this crap. The point is that this idea that there is this horrible victimization of blacks by the mainstream media and by society at large and by the police, it causes people that are not wrapped too tight, like this gentleman here, to do things like get a group of people together that are also riled up, grab firearms, and march around pointing them at law enforcement officers and police helicopters. So a Kentucky militia leader, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to move on. You can read this on your own. This is from Coffee or Die. So this is a summary of the movie Walking While Black. Okay, and this is the claim. And again, this was a movie that was shown by CSP, funded by CSP, funded by NAMI, funded by Bucks County. Okay, so what you're seeing here is you are seeing a synopsis of a movie that promotes this nonsensical idea that blacks and minorities are being victimized by law enforcement. The people victimizing blacks and minorities are blacks and minorities in these communities. Law enforcement is trying to keep law and order most of the time. If you really look at the stats, it's the truth. So as minority communities face the daily stranglehold of racial profiling, their words, not mine, and police, now look at the wording of that. The daily stranglehold of racial profiling. This is from the synopsis of the movie Walking While Black that was shown by Bucks County, by CSP, okay, by NAMI. This is what they are promoting, this idea that somehow police officers, which, by the way, they claim to be pro-police officer, but the people that they're claiming that the police are harassing, attacking, and murdering these minorities. So, Walking While Black, Love is the Answer, streaming where to watch online, blah blah blah. Now, keep that in mind. This is the concepts being promoted by Bucks County, CSP, and NAMI, okay, that minority communities face a daily stranglehold of racial profiling. This is the same agency that has police in Bucks County showing up to crimes with freaking social workers and putting everybody's life at risk. It puts the life of the perpetrator at risk, it puts the life of the officer at risk, and obviously it's putting the life of the social worker at risk. Moving on. So this anti-racist horseshit has been becoming more and more and more and more and more popular ever since the 80s, the 1980s. But it really has reached its peak in the 2000s. So the early 2000s. And then the 2010s. But this is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Now, the synopsis of the book is organized into chapters that each examine a different theme: dueling consciousness, power, biology, ethnicity, body. Now, what's funny is they claim, this guy is one of the many that claims that race is not biological, but also claims that it is biological. Okay, so biology, ethnicity, body, culture, behavior, color, white, black, class, space, gender, and sexuality. Kendi relates his evolving concept of racism through the events of his own life. Now, can you imagine, and I've never read this book, but, okay, could you imagine if Dr. David Duke, who has a PhD in history, and has actually written books like My Awakening by David Duke, which I think would probably be most similar to this book. But could you imagine if My Awakening by Dr. David Duke, which is actually a pretty decent book, I actually own the book, but could you imagine if that was taught in public schools or colleges? Not in this country. Not even any of his historical books talking about the history of communism. And Dr. Duke has a PhD, a legitimate PhD in history. So Kendi relates his evolving concept of racism through the events of his own life over 4 decades, touching on observations and experiences as a child, young adult, student, and professor from classes he has taught via contemporary events such as the O.J. Simpson robbery case, 2000 United States presidential election, and through the historical events such as the scientific proposals of polygenism in Europe in the 1600s and racial segregation in the United States. Kendi further details the manifestations of racism such as so-called scientific racism, colorism, and their intersection with demographics, including gender. Now, so-called scientific racism, we've been through this when I talked about that moron, Franz Boas. The only people that were scientifically racist were the scientific anti-racists. Kendi argues that the opposite, meaning the only legitimate scientists that were scientifically racist, if you could call them legitimate scientists. I mean, for God's sakes, Franz Boas doesn't even believe in the scientific method, so I don't know how you could even consider him a frickin' scientist. Or anybody that follows Bayesian anthropology. How can you consider somebody that doesn't believe in logic, reason, and the scientific method to be a scientist? For God's sakes. Kendi argues that the opposite of racist is, quote, anti-racist rather than simply non-racist, and that there is no middle ground in the struggle against racism. One is either actively confronting racial inequality or allowing it to exist through action or inaction, blah, blah, blah. Kendi defines a racist person as anyone who supports racist policies through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. So if you're a non-racist, you would not be a racist. Just saying. If you're not expressing these ideas, you're not perpetuating anything. You would not actively be perpetuating anything. I think that I mean, this is just, on the face of it, this is idiotic. So, exercising anti-racist ideas, consuming healthy food for thought, and being vigilant towards a recurrence of racism. Most of these people need to start consuming healthy food. That's what their main problem is. Sales, How to Be an Anti-Racist, was named one of Time's must-read books. And that's the thing. The people that are claiming that the mainstream media and everything mainstream is prejudicing these people, somehow all of their crap gets pushed to the top. Do you think that David Duke's books ever made the New York Times bestsellers list? No, they've received a blackout. Do you think Jared Taylor's books ever reached the New York Times bestseller list? No, they were blacked out. Okay? That's the truth. It had a critical reception, at least not everybody's crazy, apparently. The book received starred reviews in Publishers Weekly. Yes, because the liberals were pushing it, but I guess the public's not completely moronic. So Publishers Weekly described Kennedy's prose as thoughtful, sincere, and polished, and the book's ideas as boldly articulated. And historically, it sounds like somebody talking about Barack Obama. Jesus Christ. Stating that the book would spark many conversations. It's sparking a conversation right now, like, how the hell could anybody read this steaming pile of dog shit? Kirkus Reviews found it to be not an easy read, but an essential one. It's probably not easy to read because it's probably written poorly, but I haven't read the book, so I can't say that. Black Studies scholar Jeffrey C. Stewart called it the most courageous book to date on the problem of race in the Western mind. Professor of Civil Rights Law Randall Kennedy said, the book displays candor, independence, and self-criticality. Okay, blah, 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 references, moving on. Now, this is another popular book written by this woman here. Now, this is the kind of person, if you're wondering the kind of people that work in mental health agencies, it's people like this Robin DiAngelo, okay? These are the kind of people that work in mental health facilities and academia right here. Literally, down to the glasses. Okay, so Robin DiAngelo is an American author working in the fields of critical discourse analysis and whiteness studies. So now that's a thing. Now notice they have they have African American studies, black studies, women's studies, but when it comes to white people, we have whiteness studies, which is obviously negative, not positive. She formerly served, now I guarantee you if they had blackness studies, it would be positive. I guarantee you they wouldn't be talking about black fragility, they would be talking about how great black people are. But she is known for her work pertaining to, quote, white fragility, okay? So she was born Robin Jean Taylor. Oh, wow, so she's actually married to probably a man. That makes her a sexist, racist bigot right there. She's 66. She's an American author, consultant. So this is the thing. If you ever go to these trainings, so what they do is they make lots and lots of money giving these trainings to idiots, particularly in the mental health field and the academic field. I know because I've had to pay to go to some of these stupid-ass trainings when I worked in mental health. So it's a big scam. And what I think is funny is people will claim, so like I've always, since I discovered what Scientology actually was, I'm not a Scientologist despite what people think, I've explained I don't see how Scientology is any worse than the mental health community, and in fact it's better because people actually seem to be getting help from Scientology, whereas they seem to be getting hurt from the mental health industry. So a lot of people argue that you have to pay for the courses in Scientology. That's not exactly true. You can just buy the books and read the books. If you want the actual courses, yes, you probably do have to pay for the course. I think that's recommended and blah, 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 and to get your yada, yada, yada. But the point that I'm making here is that Scientology isn't a scam, it's a religion. This is a scam. When you're paying a consultant to teach you about how bad of a person you are, that's a scam. Robin DiAngelo is a scammer, okay? That's what it is. I mean, let's be honest. Notable ideas, white fragility. Okay. So, DiAngelo coined the term white fragility in 2011, so this is not a new concept, okay, to describe any defensive instincts or reactions that a white person experiences when questioned about race or made to consider their own race. I don't experience any of these. Does this mean that I'm non-fragile? Is that what that means? I'm not fragile? Because I go on the offensive instead of the defensive. So published on June 26th, 2018, the book entered the New York Times bestseller list. Again, another New York Times bestseller, okay? and it was remaining on the list well over a year and experiencing a resurgence in demand during the George Floyd protests. Other reviewers criticized the book for making false claims about race and racism in America. No shit. So let's go to the background. Robin DiAngelo is a white American. She is a white American academic. A white American academic. She is white. She is a white liberal kook. She worked for 20 years in providing diversity training for businesses. Identifying as progressive, she should take that back. I'm actually a progressive. Both Roosevelts would probably be disgusted by her craziness. At the same time, she found her view on race changing as she began working with people of color and experienced hostility from white people when talking about race during the trainings. I've never seen any hostility from white people when talking about race during diversity trainings. It might be that just the people I was around were completely different people than the people she was around. In fact, I'm the only white person that ever questioned anything. I was at one training, and I bring this up a lot, I was at one training where white female therapists were told if they were forcibly raped by a person of color, in the instance a black gentleman is what they were saying, that the woman, the white therapist, was the one that actually committed the rape. And this was a training being done. So they were saying that the white woman was the one that actually committed the rape because she was white and her skin color made her the automatic oppressor, and that she had to, the white women in the room had to recognize that. That's literally what these diversity trainings look like. DiAngelo coined the term white fragility in 2011. Now, to be fair, I've never been to a training with Mrs. DiAngelo. Okay? So I don't know what her trainings are like. I do know what the diversity trainings I've been to have been like. DiAngelo coined the term white fragility in 2011 to describe defensive behavior by a white person when their conception of racism is questioned. White Fragility is DiAngelo's third book. Jesus Christ, she has 2 more of these. Following What Does It Mean to Be White, I'm sure that has nothing to do with being white. Developing White Racial Literacy, and White Fragility. Now, what's funny is Jared Taylor, who has a degree in philosophy and another degree in economics, has a number of excellent books on race relations, but because they're the opposing viewpoint, nobody's ever heard of them. This is a synopsis of the book. The book opens with a foreword from Black American academic Michael Eric Dyson. DiAngelo describes white fragility to be a defensive response by a white... Okay, they're just rehashing. Okay. DiAngelo says that people associate racism with extremists such as neo-Nazis or self-identified white supremacists, who they label as bad people, and conclude that because they are a good person, they cannot be a racist. She criticizes white liberals. So this is, again, the criticism of white liberals, arguing that white people... Now, she is a white liberal that identify as progressive, view themselves as woke to avoid questioning any issue of racism. Now, progressivism, actually, the true progressivism of the United States of America, as exemplified by the first progressives, was racist. It stated that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant ideal and the concept of science, reason, and logic were to be brought to everyone, and to liberate people from savagery. That's the concepts of progressivism, that the philosophical concepts. Now, what is progressivism? It's not this crap. Progressivism literally is the application of the scientific method to the formation of public policy to benefit society. That's what progressivism is. If people don't believe me, they should learn about the first progressives. That is why I am a progressive. It's not because I'm a liberal. Progressivism is not synonymous with liberal. The author writes that Colorblindness, the idea that one should not notice or think about a person's race, is unhelpful, as it prevents people from understanding how race does matter. Yes, race, so she's admitting that race does matter. Does she admit that race is biological? I wonder. Probably not. So, moving forward. So, this is about how speed red light cameras could reduce racial disparity in police stops. You'd think they would, being that red light cameras don't see race. They only take a picture of your license plate when you go through a red light. But apparently, as you can find out from later editorials, which I'm going to show you in a second, that's not the case. Apparently, because more people of color run red lights and speed, even the cameras are somehow racist. Moving forward. Now, recently in Philadelphia, we're hearing a lot of crap about how the speed cameras and other means of enforcement in Philadelphia of running red lights and reckless driving and things like that are racist, because they catch more people of color than they catch people not of color. So the thing is, again, now they're saying the cameras are racist. So what insights can they offer? What can red light cameras offer us about racial profiling? Well, 2000 Police Quarterly, they use red light camera observations to measure racial disparities and traffic violations, blah, 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 blah. There is a significant amount of research showing that people of color are more often involved in traffic stops, blah, blah, blah. Researchers try to better understand the problem, public, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. For example, the red light cameras and racial profiling. The author analyzed information collected by the cameras, yada, yada, yada. The researchers found racial disparities when they looked at the races of local drivers caught by the cameras. It could be because more people of color are going through lights. This doesn't necessarily make people bad people. It just means that they're bad drivers. In the 8-county, now I'm going to move on. You can read this on your own if you'd like. Now, you may remember me putting this video in a previous video. This is Julia Brown. I accidentally called her Angela Davis, who was a Black Panther and a victim of Karenga. But no, she's her own person. I apologize for that mistake. But what you never hear about in the school system or in the media or anything else is the other side of the civil rights movement. So I'm going to let Julia Brown, who is speaking at that time, explain about the other side of the civil rights movement that you don't get to hear about, okay?
Well, I say it is frightening, and it should be frightened to the entire American people that he has demanded $10 billion. And if he doesn't get it, then there may be riots this summer. Martin Luther King is nothing but a blackmailer, and he should be arrested for blackmailing because he certainly has blackmailed the United States government.
There's one thing that bothers me, and that, as a Negro yourself, why do you talk so bitterly against Martin Luther King and a lot of these other people of your race?
Well, let me tell you something. I don't put my race before I do my country. Being a Negro woman doesn't matter to me who is a Negro or who is a white person. If they are enemies of our country, then they are certainly my enemies too.
Let's hear that again.
Well, I say it is frightening, and it should be frightened to the entire American people that he has demanded $10 billion. And if he doesn't get it, then there may be riots this summer. Martin Luther King is nothing but a blackmailer, and he should be arrested for blackmailing because he certainly has blackmailed the United States government.
There's one thing that bothers me, and that, as a Negro yourself, why do you talk so bitterly against Martin Luther King and a lot of these other people of your race?
Well, let me tell you something. I don't put my race before I do my country. Being a Negro woman doesn't matter to me who is a Negro or who is a white person. If they are enemies of our country, then they are certainly my enemies too.
Now, what I'd like to point out with this Miss Julia Brown, what you have to understand is what I've argued with from the beginning, back when I was in junior high school, for God's sakes, when they started this crap, when I started first getting exposed to this nonsense. What about the law-abiding black people, the elderly black people that can't go shopping, can't go to the pharmacy, because their neighborhoods are in disrepair and they'll get robbed if they try to go somewhere? I mean, I believe it was in Philadelphia, I can find it probably quite easily, about an elderly black man that was beaten to death by a group of teenage girls, teenage black girls. And this is the stuff, these poor people that abide by the law, and that gentleman might not have even been a law-abiding citizen, but he was old and weak, and they took advantage of him and beat him to death. And this is the kind of stuff that you have to learn to tolerate if you live in these areas. And it's not right. Okay, it's not right that law-abiding Americans, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, regardless of their politics, but law-abiding Americans that live in these communities have to live in absolute fear, can't go to the store, no retailer will open up in the area because they don't want to get robbed. Okay, this is not okay for the United States to have whole swaths of the country that are essentially worse than third world countries moving forward. So many people don't remember that during the civil rights movement, the Republicans were actually anti-segregation and the Democrats were pro-segregation, which is where we get the Dixiecrats and the States' Rights Party. Okay, so what people don't understand is Kennedy was very much against integration, whereas Johnson was pro-integration. But let's see what Jackie Kennedy has to say about Martin Luther King.
Jacqueline Kennedy never wrote a memoir, but now more than 8 hours of a recorded interview that she did nearly 6 months after her husband was assassinated gives the world an entirely new perspective on the former First Lady. In these interviews, she speaks candidly about her husband, the president, and his private thoughts on some of the powerful historical...
Now, this is important that people understand this because John Kennedy was trying to keep the country together. He was trying to fight communism. He was trying to do a lot of very important things. What's funny is during the 1960s, my political, I would probably politically be considered a liberal Democrat. Whereas in the current time, people would consider me a far-right extremist. It shows you how much things have changed.
Figures of the time. It was only months after her husband's assassination when a 34-year-old widow sat down to record more than 8 hours of recollections about her husband and his most private thoughts, while they were still fresh, even raw. JFK and his brother Bobby on Lyndon Johnson, the new president.
Bobby told me this later, and I know Jack said it to me sometimes. He said, "Oh God, can you ever imagine what would happen to the country if Lyndon was president?" So many times he'd say it, or if there was ever a problem.
On the day her husband was buried, the former First Lady had written to thank LBJ for all his kindness, calling him, quote, Jack's right arm. And more than that, we were friends, all four of us. Almost a half-century later, we hear a different view, perhaps colored by Bobby Kennedy.
Now, if you ever watch the interview, you can find it, the uncensored interview with Nixon on Crossfire, being interviewed by, the Constitution Party guy, Buchanan. Nixon refers to Johnson as a real man because of the alleged orgies and things that Johnson was having in the White House.
resentments after the assassination, and her annoyance after this call from Johnson a month after her husband's death, 2 days before Christmas.
I hope that you are doing all right.
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
You know how much we love you. You have a good Christmas, dear.
Thank you. The same to you.
Good night.
Hours later, Jackie learned LBJ was in fact showing off for a room full of reporters.
Now is the time.
Just as stunning are criticisms of the leader of the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but they need to be understood in context. At the time, FBI...
They need to be understood in context. In context. Right. And the thing is, the FBI director was probably telling the truth. In fact, they don't say that he wasn't telling the truth, but let's see what they say the FBI director did.
Director J. Edgar Hoover was trying to incite divisions between the Kennedys and Dr. King by telling Bobby Kennedy that Dr. King was overheard on FBI wiretaps making crude comments about Jackie Kennedy kissing her husband's coffin on the day of Jack's funeral. The tapes were supposed to be locked in a vault for a century.
So, as you can see, they're saying that J. Edgar Hoover was trying to cause division between the Kennedys and the Kings. However, you don't see them saying that those tapes were falsified or that he was lying or anything like that, just that he was trying to cause division between the Kennedys and the Kings. Well, the fact of the matter is this. Martin Luther King was an avowed Marxist that plagiarized most of his work. Now, you might not hear Dr. David Duke, Ph.D., quoted in the public school system, but you most likely have heard Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, as far as I know, Dr. Duke has never been shown to have plagiarized any of his doctoral thesis, whereas Dr. King has been shown to have done just that.
Caroline Kennedy decided to release them now, all 8.5 hours, uncensored, because she felt you don't change someone else's oral history. She also explained it isn't surprising her mother would have, at the time, made some statements she might have changed later. As Caroline told Parade, when she first read the transcript shortly after her mother died, they reminded her that her mother felt what made historical figures human was what made them more interesting. And indeed, emerging from this oral history is a very different Jacqueline Kennedy. Not the long familiar public figure whose whispery voice guided us through the White House.
It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house.
Or the fashion icon whom the president joked he accompanied to Paris.
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
This Jacqueline Kennedy is far more complex, with a keen eye for the characters around her husband.
Wow, it's so amazing that the private Jacqueline Kennedy is more complex than the one that the public saw. Wow, that's amazing. Moving forward. People may not remember, but BLM attacked the CNN building. Okay, this is from the BLM riots, if anybody remembers, I don't know.
Hey Chris, we're here inside CNN Center. We're just in the last 10 minutes. Demonstrators have started
So they have trapped reporters inside the CNN building. Watch what happens.
to come up and down this thoroughfare of Marietta and break out windows of CNN Center. It was just a short time ago that they started shooting.
They must have peacefully broken out those windows.
Appeared to be BBs at us. I was struck with a BB pellet.
They were peacefully breaking windows out of the CNN building and peacefully shooting BBs at the reporters, I assume.
It's unreal to witness here, Chris. This police line, we just saw an officer extracted. An officer was down. We don't know exactly how they were injured. Another officer here that was standing on these steps took some glass in the arm. These demonstrators are ready to confront these law enforcement officers. You have law enforcement in heavy tactical gear, protesters that are, clearly ready. You just see something else happen.
Now keep in mind, they want to take this tactical gear away from the police by demilitarization. Imagine if these police didn't have the tactical gear. They would have had to resort to violence instead of defensive measures.
Another demonstrator threw what appeared to be a large object at one of those SWAT officers. They're throwing signs at the police officers, and they're not showing any sign of dispersing. And about 15 minutes ago, they gave an order from the armored vehicles that had shown up here just outside. Those images, I'm not sure if you're looking at them. They gave the demonstrators an order to disperse. It was then that we saw more show up in tactical gear, tear gas masks, and that's when we heard over the radio that this was happening. They've broken out the windows here and are continuing to throw objects. There's just another projectile fired, appear to be a full water bottle. But there are officers that we can report. At least 2 officers have been injured. One of them, it appeared to be seriously injured. He was being dragged out. You can see what's left behind of this glass, the glass partition that separates the street. These demonstrators are now launching something that appears to be some sort of smoke grenade that they're throwing inside CNN Center right now. They're kicking it back out, guys. This is live happening in front of your eyes. They've just thrown, I think, Powerade or some sort of Gatorade or liquid, guys, on the officers.
Probably urine.
These officers are being confronted. And these demonstrators, they know what's on the other side of this. They've been warned. These officers have already fired or deployed tear gas into the crowd. We saw another with a long gun fire what appeared to be a rubber bullet at another demonstrator who had thrown a large object. You see these demonstrators are walking inside CNN Center at this point. It seems as though this man might be detained. He's being detained. Let's see if we can talk to him. Another rock just thrown there at police. We're right behind the police line. These are very large objects. Police being hit. This demonstrator, let's see if we could ask him why he was here, guys. Hey, why did you show up here today? Why are you here? Why did you come here? What made you show up?
There needs to be change here in our country. It's not black, white. Officers need to be trained better.
You took me off the air?
No, Nick, you're still there. You okay?
Hey, yeah, okay, yeah, sorry. I didn't know if I was taken off the air. This is a live active situation.
What did he say? I couldn't hear all
heard
of it.
that there. I was trying to get an interview with the demonstrator. He said he wanted to, police can do better. Police can do better. I'm here for change. We've heard
So after all this, after being trapped inside the CNN building, this idiot reporter is still on the side of the protesters, the mostly peaceful protesters that are actively shooting BBs at police, throwing smoke grenades into the CNN building, and attacking both law enforcement officers and reporters. Remember, he said he was shot with a BB also. He's a reporter, not a police officer.
chance of no justice, no peace. Another large object just thrown there at CNN. This is our home, Chris, you know. This is where we come to work every day. Journalists who are trying to tell the truth, trying to deliver information. It's one of the noble parts about society, and these demonstrators have decided...
He's trying to tell the truth by still taking the side of the protesters that are actively attacking him.
Come here today to take out their frustration and their anger, not just on the police, but it seems on our CNN center as well. These police officers now are advancing. They're grouped together as those objects continue to fly, being blocked by SWAT team shields. There appears to be one person in front of the demonstrators, Chris. I don't know if you can make him out on camera. He's got a white bandana on with his shirt off. He's trying to keep his crowd back and to try, it appears as though this is happening right live in front of us, that they're understanding the gravity of the situation here and what might escalate next.
So, Nick,
as this is happening, you're seeing just next to us, Chris, they're taking objects out of McCormick and Smith's to try to remove large objects away from the demonstrators. Go ahead, Chris.
Nick, are the cops that are inside the CNN Center the only cops that are there, or are there more cops on the backside of this crowd?
No. We're giving you a different vantage point, a different perspective. There's a larger police presence, but what has happened here in the last 20 minutes is as the demonstrators were pushed out in front of the big red letters out there in front of CNN Center, pushed into the main intersection, they started to move, sort of down more towards Centennial Olympic Park, and they took advantage of police not being in this area. They started to throw rocks at these windows, and it was just before we joined you live on air that this situation unfolded. It is unreal to see this. I know I keep using that word, but you never think something like this is...
There was more peaceful reporting in the active war zone in Baghdad in the early 2000s than this.
Going to happen here.
This is more disorderly than the active war zone in Baghdad, Iraq.
Has been historically a city that, has held demonstrations even during the rash of police shooting of African-American men in 2015. This was a city that held large demonstrations.
Again, promoting disinformation, misinformation, and the fallacy of black victimization by society.
But they were by and large peaceful. This
they're mostly peaceful.
Now, how long has this been going on, Nick?
They've been here since 3 o'clock this afternoon. We understand it was, a smaller crowd which gathered this afternoon, and it was about 7 o'clock that we started to get alerts from our national desk that they were throwing projectiles out in front of CNN Center, doing graffiti. We showed up about a half hour later, and within minutes, things took a turn. Here comes another object being thrown by a demonstrator in a mask. Now more reinforcements being brought in, coming behind our photographer, William Walker. What's going on, Kevin?
So what they're doing is
they're calling for more shields, guys. Things are getting really bad out here, Chris.
Nick, what they're going to do is they're going to create what they call a phalanx. Okay? They're going to create an angle.
It's like it's a football game. They're going to create what they call a phalanx, like Alexander the Great in ancient Macedonia.
Of these shields. And what they're going to then have to make a decision to do is to either hold, which is they expect these windows to be broken and people to advance. And this is going to be the line that the officers draw, that you will not come any further than this.
This is the most peaceful protest I've ever seen.
That's more complicated for them is whether or not to move forward, because they only have where this white guy with the skateboard is standing. That's the only way.
Wait. Notice they pointed out the white guy with the skateboard. They didn't point out the blacks behind him. No, just the white guy with the skateboard. Notice they even said the white guy with the skateboard.
They're going to then have to make a decision to do is to either hold, which is they expect these windows to be broken and people to advance. And this is going to be the line that the officers draw, that you will not come any further than this. The decision that's more complicated for them is whether or not to move forward, because they only have where this white guy with the skateboard is standing. That's the only.
Notice they don't mind pointing out the white guy with the skateboard amongst all of the black people that have been attacking police, murdering children. This is in Georgia, I believe, where a young black girl was shot by BLM protesters. Okay, so, I mean, this is absolutely, and this is like what Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who was black, says, you are throwing knives at our police officers, you are burning cars, you have defaced the CNN building. Ted Turner started CNN in Atlanta 40 years ago because he believed in who we are as a city. There was a black reporter who was arrested on camera this morning who works for CNN. They are telling our stories, and you are disgracing their building.
Only way out of the building for them, and they will not fit through there.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is a very dangerous thing to do. So they are doing a stand and hold right now. What are you hearing?
Well, it's pretty clear that these officers are nervous. They're seeing this situation de-escalate. They're trying to, as you say, hold this line here. And to the credit of the police officers so far, we have seen them not use much force while they've been having these large objects.
I don't think that's to their credit. I think they should be using force. Why are they allowing these people to throw large objects at them? That's absurd.
Thrown at them. They are establishing their presence right now. There's no doubt about that, holding this line here, Chris.
No, they're not. And, the protesters are establishing their presence.
Well, they are preparing for what they anticipate to be a rush of the building.
Wait. That was a black man in the background. They didn't say it. Where that black man with the whatever the hell that was that he swung.
The man with the skateboard.
Oh, again, the man with the skateboard.
Weapons pointed at him. This is just so sad to see happen here.
Now, that's what the umbrella is about, is to try to block the officer's vision of what's going on. The question becomes, once this guy with the skateboard succeeds and breaks the window, what does it mean to the crowd? Is that the satisfaction they want, or are they going to try to advance? And God forbid they do, you're going to have a very different situation.
Well, we'll be live right here covering it all, Chris. We're right behind the police line. They're clearly, the officers are outnumbered. Those demonstrators are going back, they're very deep, going back towards Centennial Olympic Park.
Go deep.
I feel as though I believe I just heard what I thought was a taser deployed. I don't see anyone, though, that was on the other end of it. We're seeing more shields, more reinforcements come into that line. Police officers telling their colleagues, directing them to where they need more reinforcement. We're seeing now more demonstrators come to the front. They seem like they're antsy, Chris. They seem like they're ready to charge.
Oh my God, they're so antsy.
This is not a good look. This is not a good sign here for these officers on the other side of it. And certainly not for the demonstrators who are coming towards us.
All right, so Nick, let's just go through this one step at a time. First, you and the team have a secondary location for you? If they come through here and the police start going, you have a way to get up the stairs?
We absolutely do. We've managed to put ourselves in a position where our viewers can see what's going on.
Now, what's funny, people want to make such a big deal about January 6th. What about this? What about all these private citizens that were threatened by these protesters? Nobody cares about them. Nobody cares about the private citizens that were terrorized by BLM, or the state houses that were overthrown violently by BLM, or the mayor of Minneapolis that was threatened by BLM. No, nobody cares about that, but January 6th we're supposed to care about. Now, I do care about January 6th. I've said from the beginning that 100% of the people that participated in January 6th should receive most likely life sentences for treason, but so should every one of these people right here.
And there's no story worth risking your life over, Chris. We know that. I've got a daughter and a wife I want to get home to tonight.
You got a beautiful family, I see.
Last I checked, secession was illegal.
All the time, you're a lucky man. You just make sure that the team has a place to go. You can always report later. And again, this is a tough situation.
Seriously, there have been safer... Reporters have probably felt safer in Iraq. I'm not even joking. If you remember watching the Iraq War on television, the reporters were probably, not only did they feel safer, but probably were safer in the active war zones in Iraq.
Because you have a small opening. And if they break the other window, then you have a bigger opening for the protesters to come in, although that...
Wow, this guy is brilliant. You have a small opening, but if they break out the other window, it's a bigger opening.
Be a really, really dangerous thing for them to do. And then you also have another option for the officers to try to move the line farther outside CNN. The big question becomes, Nick, do we have any way of knowing what's happening with that crowd outside in terms of policing? Or is this it? Just these cops here? You said there's a larger police presence. Where?
There is a larger police presence, just east of me here, Chris. You have the majority of those officers here. That's where the reinforcements are coming from. The crowd is, we hate to give these estimates because we haven't talked to police, but there was over 1,000 people here, perhaps even closer to 2,000 people here. Officers outnumbered. They did bring in those reinforcements, the SWAT team, members of the bomb squad.
Keep that in mind. The police were outnumbered. They had to bring in other people. They had to bring in members of the bomb squad. If you remember the height of this, they had to bring in the prison special operations units, which are used in riots because of how out of hand this crap was getting. And nobody called in the National Guard, really. And when they did call in the National Guard, all the National Guardsmen did was kneel and bow before BLM.
Patrol, local police officers, plain clothes. They've given these orders already to these demonstrators to disperse. They were starting to gear up with tear gas masks.
Oh my God, we're super serious, guys. You better disperse. We're super serious. If you don't follow through with action, what are they gonna? They don't give a shit. If you're just gonna sit there, oh my God, you better disperse. We're super serial.
Ready to deploy tear gas when all of a sudden these windows started breaking and those projectiles continue to fly in the direction of the police, Chris. There's another one. Wow. Gosh.
So, just so people understand what's going on, this is a big building, and this is an expansive lobby area. You are not in the newsroom. This is the front of a big corporate complex.
This used to be This used to be the world's largest indoor amusement park, the wacky world of Sid and Marty Krofft, before Ted Turner bought this and turned it into what is the Omni Center and then became CNN Center. You know, this used to be the site of an indoor roller coaster. It still has the world's longest freestanding escalator. You know, thousands of CNN employees are here. It's connected to a hotel.
Wait, hold on a second, Nick.
The capacity of the hotel right now.
Nick,
go ahead.
Are those guys in front preparing to light something on fire? You see how they're wrapping his hand up right now?
It looks like it.
They're either wrapping his hand up because he's going to punch the glass and he wants something to protect his hand. But I saw him pouring something on it. Maybe he hurt his hand, and they're just trying to wrap his hand. Just keep an eye on that situation. Hopefully he just is taking care of a wound, so if he cut himself, he's not going to bleed too much. Good. That's what it seems to be.
Well, they've already lit things on fire so far, Chris. They lit a police car on fire at about 8 o'clock.
So they're committing numerous felonies. Remember, arson is a felony. So they've set numerous police cars on fire. This is from the CNN reporter. This is what was going on during the BLM protests. This is the mostly peaceful protests, right? And these police, these are the horrible police that are doing virtually nothing as the whole country was terrorized. Most, if not all, of our major cities were set on fire. Does nobody remember this? Nobody remembers this, but yet the CSP, Bucks County, the CSP, NAMI, and other organizations in the mainstream news want to report this as though, you know, the police are at fault. Well, how do you expect people to respond to something like this? Why is the public allowed to be terrorized by secessionists?
Still smoldering. They've lit signs on fire. This is a crowd that came to confront police. They're angry, and we can't underscore, on the cursory level, you see the violence that is happening and unfolding right in front of our cameras. They're here under the premise because a black man was killed by police. They want to hold police accountable.
So they're there under the premise because a black man was killed by police, so that somehow gives them the authority to use unlawful violence against private citizens and public property and private property.
The message, however, has taken a violent tone here, and we don't hear the mention of George Floyd's name at all. We just see the violence happening here in front of us.
St. George Floyd, they don't hear the mention of St. George Floyd's name at all.
Well, this is a bizarre scene for people who aren't used to this. You have some people are laughing, some people are videotaping.
They just threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker. Something's on fire. Shit.
Nick, you all right?
You okay? You okay? You okay, guys? You all right? Is everyone okay? You all right, William? Okay, we're okay. Our crew's okay. They just threw a firecracker in on us. What was that?
Yeah, that was born a firecracker. Like one of those.
Was it like a
pretty powerful firecracker?
It might have been a flashbang, Nick.
Got our heart pumping a little bit.
It might have been a flashback. They may have gotten their hands on an undetonated flashbang that the police use, which does exactly what you just saw. Everybody's okay?
Good gracious. They just put something else on fire. Everything is okay, but they've just set something else on fire outside, Chris. We don't want to get any closer than here, but can you see what's going on? You pushing on that? No, okay. These demonstrators are starting out to make their way back towards the park. Well, they're loading. We understand my producer Kevin Conlon says that they're loading tear gas canisters up right now.
But if that's tear gas that's in front of there,
security's telling us to move. Chris, I gotta go.
Yeah, Nick, if that's tear gas, you're gonna want to get away from it because it's gonna come up the stairs fast.
We're getting out of here, Chris.
All right, get yourself to a safer location.
We're getting out of here. We'll get back to you later. You got it. Thanks, buddy.
All right. So here's what we've been watching, okay? You're actually not looking at Minneapolis. On your screen, you'll see it's Atlanta. That is the CNN World Headquarters. Police had been outside, and then as the crowds advanced on CNN, and they were on top of the CNN logo and spray painting things on it, and they started to light cars on fire and become increasingly violent, we had the police move inside CNN, and then the windows of CNN were broken.
It's Chris Cuomo. I didn't even know that. Chris Cuomo is the one that said, who said protests are supposed to be peaceful? If you remember from reading when I read the First Amendment, the Founding Fathers in the First Amendment clearly state that you have the right to peaceably assemble. And yeah, that this is not peaceful. This is not peaceably.
And so you had big point of ingress, but then you had what we were showing you for the last few minutes, a standoff where you had rows of protesters, or whatever you want to call them, demonstrators, angry, agitated individuals,
rioters,
up against the face of a phalanx of police inside CNN
black
World
supremacists.
Nick Valencia took cover after what appeared to be what they call a flash bang, which does what it sounds like. And now you see canisters coming, which are probably some kind of deterrent spray, either a pepper spray or tear gas. And the officers are obviously trying to clear the area in Atlanta as you watch it on your screen. Again, this is not Minneapolis. There were two sides to the police presence. There was one small group inside CNN and then a larger group down the street where there had been more violence. You see the stairs at the top of your screen on the right. That is the entrance to the CNN building. That's where we just were. Now you see where the smoke had been coming from that started to fill the lobby. It's being fired by the officers. Here you see they're trying to create a corridor in that street. You see the officers standing on the street, creating a phalanx with the tear gas or whatever the deterrent.
Now, in closing, this is the kind of behavior being supported by Bucks County, by NAMI, and by CSP. This kind of aggressively anti-civil behavior every time they lie and promote the fallacy of the collective, the fallacy of the collective black victimization by the mainstream media, by society, etc., 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 etc. Okay, you need to keep that in mind. This is the kind of behavior being promoted by the people that are targeting heterosexual white men. And that's all for this video. All of the links are in the description, and I will be making a third video too after this one.